The Hungarian Grand Prix was the first time since early 2018 that neither Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton started in the top six, but after 70 laps of racing, they were back on top. Verstappen taking his 13th win of the season, Hamilton the runner-up for the second race in a row. It's the 31st time that Max and Lewis have finished in the top two places. Welcome to the GoF1 Show. I'm your host, Matthew Marsh, and we're going to be reviewing, debriefing, breaking down the Hungarian Grand Prix tonight. We're also going to be talking, of course, about Max Verstappen and Red Bull Racing and their winning ways. We're going to be talking about the Butterfingers at Ferrari again. We're going to be talking about Sebastian Vettel confirming his retirement from Formula One at the end of this season, and Fernando Alonso making a surprise choice of team, yet again, for 2023. We want to hear from you also, your questions, your comments, and I'm going to pose a question to you because Lewis Hamilton on Sunday broke a record. It was for the most laps led at a single venue. I'd like you to tell me what the venue was, and if you know who was the person that held the previous record and what that venue was, I'll give you an extra point for that. No prizes, just for fun. And joining me as usual to analyse the goings-on is a man who raised eyebrows last week by suggesting that Mercedes would be strong in Hungary. Who's laughing now, Alex?
No one, hopefully. It was quite nice, actually, because we saw them struggle a bit on Friday. And I got a few texts saying, are you sure about the Mercedes going well? And wow, they really impressed, didn't they? Russell with his first pole.
Absolutely, absolutely. The podium positions, of course, on Sunday were exactly the same as those last week. Verstappen, Hamilton, George Russell, but a very different kind of race. Perhaps you could run us through a summary of that. We've had Ben Grimes actually has been helping Miko this week, so thanks to Ben and Miko for putting together this summary sheet of what happened.
Yeah, I mean, Hungary does serve up some good races, either incredibly boring or incredibly exciting. And yesterday was exciting as well. So, I mean, Russell led from good start off the line from pole position, and he had the two Ferraris behind him, but he had them pretty comfortable. But you could see the soft tires weren't going to last, so he pitted on lap 17 to cover the Ferraris who looked like they were about to pit and try and do an undercut. So did Verstappen on the same lap, went from soft to mediums. Leclerc, though, did really well. He eked out his mediums for another 5 laps, so he went medium, and he rejoined P2 in front of Sainz and right behind Russell, and he made those fresh tires really work well. Russell defended really well for many laps. It took 9 laps for Leclerc to get past Russell, but he eventually did on lap 31. And then we saw the middle stints coming in, and Verstappen was again pitted early, went from medium to medium. And this was the curious thing. Leclerc also pitted, and Ferrari put him on hards to try and cover Verstappen. But that always seemed like a really crazy idea because Leclerc's tires were still really good, in very good shape. His mediums he was on. And the hards didn't have any grip, and you could see that from the very beginning of the race from Magnussen and the Alpines. The hards were just not working yesterday. It was too cold for the hards. Russell went to the mediums, and both Verstappen and Russell were able to get past Leclerc quite easily, despite Verstappen even having a 360. And then, it looked pretty comfortable for Verstappen at that point, and we saw a great charge from Hamilton. Hamilton always looked strong, because he was strong the whole race, but he had that extra set of new softs, which he put on with the 90 laps remaining, I think, and that was a great charge by the Englishman. He went from P5 to P2, a really good result from him.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alex. That was great. Of course, you mentioned the spin that Max Verstappen had. It wasn't an entirely straightforward race. It wasn't an entirely straightforward qualifying session, was it? Because he had a problem with the deployment of the electrical energy, which meant he started 10th. They changed the power unit actually on both of the Red Bull cars to essentially fix that electrical problem. So my question to you is, who impressed you most? Was it the Red Bull Racing team or the driver?
Gosh, there were so many winners there. Yes, Verstappen had a great drive. I mean, he did do his 360 as well. We can't give him a perfect 10 for that, can we? I think Red Bull just got the strategies well. Hamilton, actually, for me, was probably the driver of the day. George Russell also had a fantastic opening stint. He really made those soft tires work really well under big pressure from the two Ferraris. So there were a few good stories out there, but I mean, we're going to cover it in a second.
Particularly, I mean, on the Red Bull Racing team, do you think it was, who do we attribute the win to? Do we attribute it to mostly Max or mostly the team? It's the old driver car question, but
It's the team. We've always seen this from Red Bull. They're a real racy team. Mercedes too. They always make racing decisions. And people might ask me, what does that mean? Sometimes you have to gamble and you have to play the odds. And you have to make racy decisions. And Red Bull always tend to do that, especially when Mercedes were dominant and untouchable in the hybrid era until last year. You always saw Red Bull being very daring with the strategy. Sometimes it wouldn't come off, but sometimes it would result in a win. And we saw that yesterday as well. And again, the team listening to the driver as well. You just mentioned about the team, what the driver said. Because the driver said on the way to the grid, man, I can't fire up the softs. Verstappen was saying that he can't fire up the soft. There was no grip on that one lap to the grid. And drivers do get a feel for this. And engineers need to trust their drivers when they say stuff like this. So if you couldn't make the softs work, then you're never going to make the hards work. And this was a team going, right, okay, this is not happening. We're not going to do it. We're not even going to consider it. And it was borne out, You could see that the other teams are struggling with it. And I know we're going to talk about it now, obviously, but how Ferrari went to the hards is a mystery.
It is a mystery. You know that this man, Max Verstappen, has only started lower than 10th 3 times. And when he has, 10th or lower, sorry. And each, I want to say it's probably 4 times now. Anyway, I'm blowing my own stat because he's always finished on the podium when he's finished 10th, when he started 10th or below. It's pretty impressive. And I think I'm right in saying this isn't the first time that he's spun and won. And I say that because spin to win 85 is the famous sort of moniker for Danny Sullivan, guest of the show, current FIA driver steward, Indy 500 winner in 85. But actually, Max, I think, has now won 2 Grand Prix, and including a spin. I think it was 2019 in the wet at Hockenheim he did it. And remember that qualifying earlier this year at Silverstone, he did a 360 as well. I think he's kind of basically getting into the habit of doing them now. He's quite good. I think he should actually get an extra point each time he does one.
I think Hamilton dominated Hockenheim one year in the wet. And I think I remember him doing 360 as well. There are a few very good drivers that are able to do that, get away with it.
Yeah. And then before we move on, we're going to look at the top 10. But before we do that, Max Verstappen had 63-point advantage coming into this weekend. Nobody's ever lost a championship having that much of an advantage before. And he has now 80 points. So I'm going to we're very good at this with you. We're going to get you to now predict, can he lose the championship from this moment on?
Oh, no, man. It's done. Championship's done. Sorry, guys. I know we're only halfway through the season, but it's done.
Okay.
Verstappen's driving too well.
Can you clip that out and we'll use that later in the season when they have all the engine issues?
Yeah, they go with 3 DNFs suddenly, and then it's all game on. You need a strong competitor to come back from 80 points, and right now Ferrari don't look strong enough. They got the car that's strong enough, but they themselves don't look strong enough.
No, they don't. Let's remind ourselves of what else happened in this race. Let's look at the top 10 results. We know that Max Verstappen won the race by almost 8 seconds. We know that Lewis Hamilton and George Russell finished 2nd and 3rd for Mercedes. Carlos Sainz was the first Ferrari, coming in 4th. Charles Leclerc, the 2nd Ferrari, in 6th, with Sergio Perez for Red Bull in between them. Lando Norris finished 7th, the same position he's actually been in now for 3 consecutive races. And Fernando Alonso, 8th. His 8th consecutive points finish this year. I like this symmetry with Esteban Ocon behind him. That's helping Alpine in the Constructors' Championship. And then Sebastian Vettel rounding out the top 10 point scoring positions. Let's talk about Mercedes. They led more laps today than the rest of the season combined. Another double podium. Mercedes now have as many podium finishes as Ferrari, would you believe?
Yeah.
It's Hamilton's 5th consecutive podium, which is the longest active streak. And it's also more podium finishes than Charles Leclerc has had this year, Lewis Hamilton. So the question for you is, he starts 7th after a DRS failure in qualifying, and finished 3rd. Finished 3rd? Finished 2nd. How good a race was it?
It was very good. Hamilton got held up by the Alpines a little bit, and that allowed... first of all, Hamilton had a great start. Got him, because he didn't qualify well after the DRS issue in qualifying. But he did get held up by the Alpines a little bit, and that allowed Verstappen to really get on him. And actually, Verstappen overtook him quite easily in that first stint. You have to remember, though, that Hamilton was trying to go long with those mediums at that stage, so I don't think he was trying to destroy his tires. But that put him behind Verstappen at this point. If he'd qualified in the top 3, I think he had the pace, and I do think he had the pace to try and challenge for the win. But as it was, put him behind Verstappen. But after that, it was very interesting because Mercedes, again, racy decision, committed to a two-stop because Hamilton went straight to another set of mediums, knowing he had one set of softs, brand new softs, and he was the only driver in the top 10 that had a brand new set of softs, and that was clever. They've done that 2 seasons in a row in Hungary, where they've come back with a late tire change, soft tires, and come on, almost won the race 2 years ago. Last year, almost got the win as well, and I think they went for that strategy again, and it worked really well for them. Second place was really well deserved.
Yeah, they're so solid as a team, aren't they? The record that was broken, I mentioned, Lewis has now led more laps at a single venue. Mm-hmm. Any ideas? I'm going to give you a chance to score the bonus point.
I can't pronounce his name, but it's the Indy 500, that guy at the Indianapolis, isn't it?
My word, yeah. This is very impressive. Alex Yoong going from former F1 driver to stat king. It's Bill Vukovic, who had 483 laps led at the Indy 500 circuit, Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and now Lewis Hamilton has more than that many laps led at Hungaroring. Incredible number of laps led. Anyway, that's about Lewis.
Yeah, but sorry, but here go my Lewis. That's what makes Hamilton so good. He's dominated on some really strange tracks that are completely different. He dominates at Montreal and he dominates at Hungary, and then he also dominates at Silverstone as well. And those 3 tracks couldn't be any more different.
George Russell then. Huge pressure starting on pole position, drizzling at the start. I thought he sounded a little bit nervous actually on the radio when they were telling him the rain's coming in. So my question for you is, were you surprised by how strong his performance was, particularly in those opening 17 laps?
No, not at all. I expect this from him. That's how highly I regard him. He knows the stage was set yesterday for a win. If he could have won yesterday in whatever the conditions were, that would be putting him up there. It would be the sort of drive that we saw, like maybe Senna at Estoril, or even Alonso's first win at Hungary and stuff. It's a sort of drive where if he'd won, people would be saying, "Wow, this guy's really going to be good." So his first stint was mega. His first stint was really mega, and I expected that from him. On the soft tires, how he could hold off the Ferraris was very good. Medium stint, though, went away. He didn't quite have the pace on the mediums that I expected him to. Hamilton was a lot stronger. I thought at first maybe the Mercedes, we've seen it all this year. It's hard to get it in the window, and if it goes a little bit out, the pace disappears. So I thought that was what was happening with George. But I don't think so, actually, because Hamilton was very strong in the middle stint. And, of course, in the last stint when he had soft tires on. So I think George will be looking at that thinking, I think I could have done a bit better there. And he'll be looking at the data and seeing what happened in the middle stint, what happened in the last stint, what could I have done differently to have been a bit better.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the similarity between George Russell and Lewis Hamilton is that self-critical nature, isn't it? They are immediately thinking, because I heard him after the race saying, when we started on the soft tyres with the 2 Ferraris on the mediums, most of the other drivers on mediums around me, and it was drizzling, I was thinking, great, we're going to drive into the distance. And then when it stopped drizzling, that kind of hampered us and we didn't get much of a gap. And then at the end of the race, I was on mediums, but they were relatively old mediums. And he was saying that immediately after the race in the pen. And it told me he has a kind of helicopter view, right, as all the greats do, of exactly what was going on in his race and knew all the details, was already analysing it. It's very impressive. Yes. Speaking of impressive, if we rewind to Saturday afternoon, the surprise pole position, George becomes the 3rd new pole sitter this year. Of course, Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez are the other 2. What do you think about the lap that he drove?
It's fantastic. He didn't even set a purple sector, purple speed trap, just green, and just maximize everything from that car. We've been calling him Mr. Saturday for a while now, haven't we, Matt? And we've seen him normally doing it at the back of the grid with the Williams, but yes, that Saturday, was it 2 days ago, was a perfect example why he's so good in qualifying. And once he gets a car that's capable of fighting in the front, he's going to get a lot of pole positions in his career.
Yeah, I agree with you. And speaking of pole positions, we've got a question from our friend I think it's in Indonesia, Laswadi Prasetyo, who actually asked us 2 questions. And the one that's relevant to this point is, he says, I think George Russell's pole on Saturday somehow messed with Ferrari's head and they were overthinking and trying to be cute with strategy. It's quite a good point, really. Certainly something happened.
Well, I don't think they're trying to be cute. I think they're trying to be too conservative. Again, we'll talk about this in a while, I know, but Ferraris, the pressure you have in Ferrari, and they're so scared to make mistakes that they end up making mistakes. I don't think George Russell. I think Ferrari would have been confident that they could have still beaten Russell, and they should have. They just made the wrong calls on the day.
They should have. Let's talk about them, right? Because they're the team with the fastest car this year. They had a very difficult Sunday. A lot of questions swarming around about the Scuderia all of this season, particularly on Sunday, and in particular how they operate. So I took the opportunity earlier today to catch up with somebody who worked there in the past for several years. We know him well, as he was their press officer, Alberto Antonini. And I started by asking him, what's the reaction been like in Italy today after the kerfuffle in Hungary?
In the end, it was a strategic error. I just brought to share the city with the white tires. The hard tire was not the tire for that race, and everybody knew that. So the reaction has been really, really harsh. I can't remember anything like that back from my time when I was with the Scuderia. We have everything in place to win the title, the championship this year. And then you see what happens, Silverstone, Monaco, and all the way down the line. So reliability failure is one thing which will probably make people not so happy. But this kind of, mismanagement is probably even worse in terms of reaction from the public. I think they have to overcome some sort of psychological issue, a block, if you wish, because there was no point with a car which is so fast. There's no point in just having your race copied and just on Verstappen's race. They could try to go their own way and probably come out better with it. They need to rethink and refine and slim down the process of decision making, because they need more flexibility and more reactivity to the actual condition, what you see.
Right. It's really good to catch up with Alberto today. He's actually involved in the management of Alex Palou, who, IndyCar champion, and in some controversial circumstances now maybe moving, or is moving probably, to McLaren for next season. That's another story. But I've got to tell you, Alberto has been away from Ferrari now for about 4 or 5 years. I haven't seen him since then, but he looks quite a lot younger than when I last saw him working at Ferrari, which might tell you quite a lot. But let's just quickly recap what happened in the race for Ferrari. Carlos Sainz actually faster than Charles Leclerc, out-qualified him only for the third time this season. They start second and third behind Russell. They start on the medium tyres. Russell leaves until lap 17 when he comes in for the pits. Sainz stops immediately afterwards, which is kind of early considering he's on mediums. Leclerc carries on, but then loses the lead later on when he stops on lap 22, medium to medium again. Passes George Russell on lap 31. Kind of so far so good. The pace is looking good. He's got 5 seconds advantage on George. Lap 39 comes. Max Verstappen stops for the second time. Leclerc follows him in on lap 40. What was your reaction, Alex Yoong, when you saw the hard tyres go on Leclerc's Ferrari?
I can't. Okay, I'm going to break it down to 2 ways. Yes.
It's a family show, right?
It's dreadful, just absolutely dreadful. It's as bad as it gets. It's a worse mistake. I mean, even Michael Massey's mistake last year in Abu Dhabi was not as bad as this mistake. Okay, so first of all, there was another decision taken which screamed to me of someone scared to make of the wrong decision. They're not really interested in making the right decision. They're more scared about making the wrong decision. So their data says hard tire is the way to go. So that's a sort of decision an engineer makes when it's like, well, I just followed the data. How can you blame me for following the data? Whereas if he goes, I'm going to go against the data, I'm seeing Alpine struggling, I'm seeing Haas struggling on the hard tires. It's too cold for the Haas tire. I'm going to go with my gut feeling and say, no, we can't use a hard tire. Imagine if he gets that wrong, how he'll get strung up. So again, it screams to me of someone that's more scared of making a wrong decision than actually making the right decision. And that's something we've seen with Ferrari since the 90s, since the 80s. It only disappeared for a while in the Schumacher years because you had John Todd protecting his people. He protected the people that made the decisions. He said, let them make decisions, do not criticize them, and just let them do what they do best, which is what John Todd did very well. They don't have that guy to protect him at the moment. KS Benito does protect him. He does actually a really good job, which now brings me onto the second part of this, which is, why are they making these decisions? And the trick here is, Ferrari don't make racing decisions. It doesn't seem like they have real racers in that team. It seems like it's been run by a whole bunch of backroom staff, if I may be, and it's really wrong for me to say this. I'm not going to single out anyone or criticize anyone because I'm not involved in the team. So it's not fair for me to do that. But sometimes you need to be able to stick your finger in the air and see where things are going and try and make decisions that are racing decisions. And sometimes you need drivers for that. You need drivers or you need engineers who have done other things. If you are an organization in Formula One and you promote from within the company all the time, you get a lot of engineers who have only ever done Formula One their whole life. And they're just engineers. And they've only worked with Formula One drivers. So they don't understand sometimes that Formula One drivers don't know what they're talking about. And they don't have experience of working with other drivers from other championships or working other championships like Le Mans or DTM or anything like this. So all they know is Formula One, and they only see a very small window. So that is also an issue, which I think is the people making those strategic calls. I got a feeling they're people that have been promoted from within the factory and don't have enough of a worldview experience. And I'm going to just go and say the opposite of this is Christian Horner. Christian Horner is a racer, and he's an ex-driver as well. I'm not saying Christian Horner makes decisions on the pit wall. Absolutely does not. But he would always make sure he has engineers who are racers. Because if he saw an engineer making a bad decision, he'd be like, right, okay, no. That guy, he's got to go. He's got to go. He's just got to go. The way he thinks, the way he does things, it's just not in tune with being able to look and see what's happening with the strategies and how things evolve. You got people like Ross Brawn, who is. You got people like Adrian Newey and stuff. So engineers can be racing, but Christian Horner would have made sure he had proper racers making these strategic decisions. I don't feel that's happening in Ferrari. I think the people who are making decisions are not. They need to change.
And the point Alberto was making to me earlier was that there's a lot of people involved in talking about the decisions, but not very many people, or not actually kind of, as you say, one person who's making the decisions. And therefore, there's just a lot of conversation, and decisions, as we've seen, they seem to come too late. There's a question from John the Storyteller.eth. So it's probably somebody in the NFT business, and he's asking if we can help him understand Ferrari's decision to switch Leclerc to the hards when it wasn't working on the rest of the grid. And he's, I think, speaking specifically about the Alpines, which we'll touch on later on. But I mean, to help on that one, because both Carlos Sainz and Mattia Binotto post-race said, look, the problem actually was we didn't have the pace in the race. That was our biggest problem. And there's some truth in that, isn't there? Because in that last stint, Sainz versus Hamilton, both on softer tyres, Lewis was well over 1 second a lap faster. So
yeah,
that's... Yeah. But
sorry, because...
I guess what I'm saying is that I think perhaps to the point you're making about not making the decisions clearly, they got confused is the wrong word, it's pejorative, but I mean, there was some cloud cover, right? Which is that one, they were fighting against Verstappen as opposed to leading their own race, which again, a confident person might say, forget them, we're doing our own thing. And they were maybe a bit bemused by the lack of pace they had relative to the cars around them, given how fast they were on Friday. It was 25 degrees hotter, of course, on Friday. But I wonder whether that actually was the stuff that kind of caused them to spin out of control a little bit on the tactics here. No,
as a driver, the decision they made was really bad. As a driver, it's really obvious to me. The problem is, you need to be a racer to understand how sometimes it works like this. When tires don't switch on, there's absolutely nothing you can do. Absolutely nothing you can do. Doesn't matter looking at data and stuff like that. And you need to be able to see that. And you need to, so like Red Bull, Verstappen said, I can't switch on my tires. The guys be like, oh crap, you can't switch on the softs. It is cold. We're not touching the hards. Yeah. And I would be very surprised if Leclerc or Sainz also on the way to the grid didn't say stuff like, it's a bit cold, struggling to get the temperature in it. Maybe they didn't say I can't switch on the softs, but they would have said something to that effect. But no one in that team cottoned on to it. And even then, if you don't cotton onto it, that's still forgivable. But when you see Haas out there struggling with hard tires, and then you see both Alpines go out and do it halfway through the race when the fuel's gone down a bit, and also struggle with that, they have a whole team of people watching other strategies. Okay, I'm not going to say anything against the race engineers because they're looking at a lot of stuff. They can't obviously look at what's happening around them. But there's a back team back at the factory who is looking at all these strategies and who should be feeding back to them and saying, look, the hard tire is not working with Alpine. And if no one's saying that, why aren't they saying that? Are they too scared to stick the neck out? Which again is a problem with Ferrari.
Last week in France, Carlos Sainz was defensive of the team and he said Ferrari always get too much criticism. Last week, Alex Yoong said Charles Leclerc shouldn't be so self-critical of himself. My question to you now is, should Ferrari be more openly, publicly self-critical in the way that Charles is?
Okay, so I didn't say so. Self-critical is fine, but wasting energy in bringing yourself down is not good. That's what I said about Leclerc. Ferrari need to do some real soul searching here. Last weekend also, I defended Ferrari because I gave them the benefit of the doubt. But this one, you can't give them the benefit of the doubt. It's a really, really poor decisions. I kind of don't know where to start with this. It's.
Well, there's one more thing. Alberto said to me, it was such a long conversation. It was brilliant, and by the way, all of it will be on our YouTube channel in a couple of days' time. It's worth listening to. He said so many interesting things that were kind of tangential. One of the things he said, do you remember that time? And I do remember because we were there with Fox Sports, and in 2018 when Ferrari at the beginning of qualifying went out on wet tyres and the track was dry. And he said it was obviously a mistake and it was born of the rain's coming, we'll go out on wets, but the track was dry. And he said the interesting thing to him that baffles him is that 5 years later, there are people at Ferrari who still think that was the right decision. And that's kind of the problem.
Yeah, so that's why you need proper races there. I really think that Ferrari could do with a driver coach, a proper driver coach in there, not just there to coach the drivers, but to help with the engineers, to translate what the drivers are saying and to say, okay, this bit they're saying that, you can completely ignore them. The drivers are just being little babies. Okay, this bit, what they're saying, you need to pay attention to this because it's really serious what they're saying here. Because I don't think they have that. And I do find this with a lot of Formula One engineers who've only ever done Formula One. Because they get drivers who are gods, the Formula One drivers. So they buy everything they say. They're not able to see where the different layers are. And you only really get that when you work with junior drivers, or if you do other championships like Le Mans and stuff, when you work with endurance because when you do an endurance drive, your drivers are really stripped down. You have to work together. So what they say is a lot different than when it's more competitive like Formula One and you're working against your teammate. So I don't feel that there's enough worldly experience in the Ferrari strategy room because there are teams all around the world who've been doing lots of other championships who are as gobsmacked as me and you of what happened with Ferrari.
Yeah, and fans at the racetrack and on social media at the moment it happened. Let's be positive for a second. Two things I thought. One was that Carlos Sainz was fast again, as he's been getting better and better all season, but he was really good. I thought obviously faster than Charles in qualifying. He was also in France, but France had the engine penalties for Charles, but he was quick. And the other thing I thought was positive was that particularly those front three, as they came up to George Russell's first stop, were running line astern, and it seemed like the aero regs really are working, that cars really can run line astern. Yeah.
If you ask me who's my hero of the year, I'm going to say it's FIA. They finally got the regs right. As the governing body, they should get the regs right. We shouldn't be giving a pat on the back for doing a good job because we expect them to do a good job. But after the terrible jobs they've been doing in the past, 2009 regulations, I'm looking at you, they've really got it wrong before. So I was so pleased to see cars following close to each other and overtaking at Hungary. You never get over any overtaking at Hungary. So I'm so pleased. So FIA get 2 thumbs up from me for the new regs.
There you go. And what about you, our listeners, our watchers? What do you think? Please let us know on social media. Of course, you know the handle at GoF1 Show. Questions are coming in. Thank you for those, and send more if you can. And comments. We'd just like to hear what you think about these things. Do you agree with Alex? Is it 2 thumbs up to the FIA for the technical regulations this year? We're not talking about anything else. Right, after the break, we're going to be reflecting on the career of Sebastian Vettel, about his surprise replacement also at the Alfa Romeo Formula One team. The hybrid era of Formula One has not been especially kind to Sebastian, but for a look at the future of hybrid work, here's a word from our friends at WebEx by Cisco.
Late braking, what do you think?
Love it or no chance?
Daniel, no chance.
Let's put up a poll.
Love it, love it, love it wins.
We need that part.
It's nearly done.
Can you repeat that? That's better.
It's done.
With WebEx, the McLaren Formula One team is collaborating like never before. Introducing the WebEx Suite, driving hybrid work.
Welcome back to the GoF1 Show. I'm your host, Matthew Marsh. I'm joined, of course, by former F1 driver Alex Yoong. And a quick reminder of the results of the Hungarian Grand Prix. It was won by Max Verstappen, his 13th victory of the year. And he finished ahead of Lewis Hamilton and George Russell for Mercedes. Ferrari finished 4th and 6th, Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc. And Sergio Perez finished 5th. Lando Norris 7th, Fernando Alonso 8th, Esteban Ocon 9th, and Sebastian Vettel in 10th place. And then let's have a look at how that affects the World Drivers' Championship. The top 10 there. Max Verstappen had 63 points advantage before this race. No one's ever lost a championship with that many points advantage. He now has 80. So it's looking pretty good for the 24-year-old Dutchman. Sergio Perez has closed the gap to second, Charles Leclerc, from 7 points to 5. George Russell is the only mover. He moves up to 4th from 5th, overtaking Carlos Sainz. He's fully 100 points off Max Verstappen, but off P2, only 20 points. Would you believe it? Lando Norris likes the number 7. I think he's finished P7 the last 3 races, 7th in the World Drivers' Championship. The 22-year-old qualified 4th at the Hungaroring, his best qualifying position of 2022. We asked you for your questions. We've had some coming in. One of them, actually I mentioned this earlier, was from our friend Lazwadi, who was asking, if you remember earlier, about George Russell and whether that pole position might have distracted the boffins in Maranello. He's asking now about whether Alpine's infighting cost them points on Sunday. He's referring, I think, to a couple of moments. One was lap 1, where Fernando Alonso complained of Esteban Ocon's robust defence, saying, "I have never seen anything like this ever," in, whatever that is, 22 years of Formula One racing. And then on lap 24, Ocon came out of the pits just ahead of Fernando. They both got onto the hard tyres. I think Fernando was trying to undercut him, and they got in each other's way. Daniel Ricciardo swept past into 10th. The reality is, and let's have a look now at the World Constructors' Championship table, and we'll see that that they did lose some points to McLaren, but still they're ahead. Alpine 4 points ahead of McLaren in the table, and the reality was, as we were touching on earlier, that for whatever reason, probably because they didn't have enough other tyres available, they chose to go a one-stop strategy. This is Alpine I'm talking about, medium hard, and that cost them pace. They did finish 8th and 9th. They both scored for the 3rd consecutive race, but they started 5th and 6th, the Alpine team. First time since in 2022 they've both been inside the top 6, so rather baffling that they would choose to use those hard tyres in the race. Elsewhere, other than that battle between Alpine and McLaren, which, as I mentioned, is now 4 points in favour of Alpine for P4, the big story is Mercedes closing in on Ferrari, just 30 points separating Mercedes from P2 in the Constructors' Championship. No points scored on Sunday for Sauber, Alfa Romeo, Haas, Williams, or indeed AlphaTauri. Pierre Gasly finished 12th. He sits 13th in the Drivers' Championship. Hasn't scored any points in his last 5 races. A remarkable run of bad form for the Frenchman. A team that did score a point, only one, but they did score 1 point. And on the weekend of his announcement, it was taken by Sebastian Vettel. They're 9th in the Constructors, and they scored 1 point. And on the subject of Sebastian Vettel, when I was talking earlier in the day to Alberto Antonini, who of course worked at Ferrari, he joined the team at about the same time as Sebastian, ahead of the 2015 season. So I took the opportunity to ask him whether he was surprised that the 35-year-old 4-time world champion is calling time on his career. You also worked when you were at Ferrari with Sebastian Vettel, who's announced his retirement. Were you surprised that he chose to stop now?
No, not at all. He probably, I would go as far as say he stayed 1 year too long. It's not performance-wise, because he's been able to perform, and he had ups and downs, but that probably related to his state of mind as well. But it was high time for him to say, okay, let's pull the plug on this and let's do something else. He has the resources. He's still very young, at 35. He has a wonderful family. It's backing him, supporting him. And I'm looking forward to actually come see him doing something else and do what he's been interested in.
If there was one thing that you think that he could have done better as a driver, what would that be?
Okay, he did everything he had to do at Red Bull, and people tend to forget that he has won 4 world championships in a row. With Red Bull, he probably had the right environment for him. When he came along with Ferrari, we just joined the team virtually together at the end of 2014, and he just started. I want to be blunt, sir. He's annoying some people by telling, "No, that's not the way we did it." The Red Bull, and as I say, "You're not the Red Bull now, that's right." And he also clashed in a way with the reality of such a big company, where, as I said before, everything has to be gauged because you always kind of worry about the consequences of what you do.
What do you think, Alex? Is it the right time for Sebastian to step away?
Yes. He lovely man, great driver. But he's just not had that consistency, that intensity for the last 4 years, I'm going to say. He still can produce the goods on occasion, but, too many mistakes has been creeping into his driving and stuff. And, but he's such an ambassador for the sport. We will miss him for sure. But, Matt, you and I have been getting a bit, we don't, where there's so much up and coming talent, it sometimes doesn't feel right when some of the old guys hang around and yes, they're still on one hand performing at a pretty high level, but they're not at the level they were, or he was, say, was it 6 years ago, 7 years ago? And yeah, I think it is the right time for him to step away.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think a couple of things. Last time he won a Grand Prix was Singapore 2019, which is, it's quite a while ago. And he, in Hungary, crashed in free practice 3 in the rain, which is, everybody does it from time to time. So he started 18th, made it up to 10th, nice solid race. 5th time he's scored points this season, beat Lance Stroll, I mean, I'm getting pretty worn down just talking about it, let alone 3rd on the all-time winners list. That's the thing that I think does surprise me whenever I read that, is that Seb's career was that remarkable, has been that remarkable in terms of the data, 3rd on the all-time behind only Lewis Hamilton and, of course, Michael Schumacher.
Yeah, I mean, and 4 world titles, and he was untouchable in the Red Bull years, wasn't he? And, he had some really good seasons with Ferrari as well. It's not to say that he was completely off the boil. But the way he dominated the 4 years in Red Bull just kind of makes me, that was Seb Vettel doing really well. Let's not forget his first win in the wet, 2008 for Toro Rosso. It was called Toro Rosso and then called AlphaTauri now. That was an amazing win. So, it deserves to be said one of the greats. But you have to say those 4 wins in a row, Red Bull, I think sometimes we underestimate how good that those Red Bulls were in those years.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. It was really insightful, the conversation, as I say, with Alberto. Really appreciate his time. Thank you to you, Alberto Antonini. And if you want to get the full-length chat, you can. Of course, it's on the GoF1 Show YouTube channel. And Alberto's full conversation, that'll be up in a day or two. There's the conversation we had last week with Andrew Shovlin of Mercedes is there. Romain Grosjean, recent conversation we had with him. And then this coming week, and to keep everybody entertained during the 3-week summer break, I've got a chat tomorrow with Alex Albon, the Williams driver, Nick de Vries, who is linked to Williams, of course. He's did one of the free practice sessions for them earlier this season, reigning Formula E champion from the Netherlands, talking to Andreas Seidel from McLaren. That should be a fascinating conversation. Looking to the season so far for them. Fred Vasseur, I'm talking to also, I think, on Wednesday. Better check my calendar, I suppose, from the Sauber Alfa Romeo team. I want to get his thoughts on Zhou Guanyu and more. Now, if we thought we were going to be busy with tonight's show, we were. And then Fernando Alonso announces that he's joining the Aston Martin Racing Formula One team. Aston Martin Formula One team. Replacing the person we were just chatting about, Sebastian Vettel. I've got a question from the audience. And the question is from Andrew Lawrenson, who's asked, given the rather strong showing from Alpine and Fernando in this year, he means 2022, and the comparative performance of Aston Martin, as in not very good, does the move announced by Fernando say more about the future of Aston Martin, Alpine, or about Fernando himself? It's kind of a complicated question, but I think he's saying, what? It's actually basically what Andrew's asking.
It's about Fernando, isn't it? I mean, Fernando is the greatest driver in the world for making really questionable decisions. I mean, every step of his career, he's made questionable decisions. I mean, he's doing well at Renault. Went to McLaren, got beaten by Hamilton in that first year, and decided, right, I'm going to leave McLaren, and I'm going to leave them on really bad terms. Went to Ferrari. Went back to Renault for a while, and just as they were doing fairly decent, he left them again and went to Ferrari. And left Ferrari on bad terms. Went to McLaren, left McLaren, I don't know, not in the greatest terms either. He always goes to teams when they're not doing very well. And if I was Aston Martin, I'd be very worried. Because when Fernando Alonso goes to, you tend to take a big dive. And I'm upset about this in so many different ways. One is, of course, Fernando shooting himself in the foot. And of course, we might be completely wrong. In a year from now, he might be world champion with Aston Martin. In that case, I'll gladly eat my foot, if that's the right saying. But you know what I mean? It's just, I can't believe he's doing this. Alpine is suddenly look really good now. They're not Fernando Alonso's performance this year, if he was a rookie, everyone would be baying for him to be in a top 3 team. He hasn't had that consistency. He still makes mistakes, but when he's been quick, wow. Second place in qualifying for Montreal in the wet. Even on the weekend, he was really strong. Okay, he couldn't get past Ocon at the start, but he eventually got his way past him. Alonso's driving really well. We just talked about how we don't like old drivers hanging around past the sell-by date. Kimi Räikkönen. But Alonso is not doing that. He's extremely exciting to watch. I love watching him right now. And okay, he's not in the top 3 best team, but Renault's got the 4th best car out there. And they're a works team. They're going to finish the year strong. They're going to take 4th in the championship. What might happen next year? But we won't see Alonso in the car next year. I'm not excited about Ocon anymore. Ocon's had many years at this now, and we already know his level. And now are we seeing Alonso go to Aston Martin?
Yeah.
I don't even want to watch that. I'd rather he retire. I'd rather he retire and go try and win the Indy 500.
It's going to be like the time when he was at McLaren with the Honda engines when they weren't good engines, and all that complaining on the radio, and it was like that buzzing cloud of bees over his head whenever he was in the paddock, and they were grumpy sitting at the table in the McLaren brand centre motorhome thing. It was just dreadful.
And even going to McLaren, going from Ferrari to McLaren. I know for Ferrari years are hard, but he went to McLaren in a transition, and that was the time he decided to stick it out, and he stuck it out for 3 years with right at the back. What a waste! What a waste of talent.
So there's some good news though. There is some good news, isn't there? Which is, as we said, it's good news that Sebastian Vettel had a great career and is now deciding to pursue other interests, as they call it. And it's good news that there's a space opening up. And it's also perhaps quite good news, actually, that Fernando's vacating a pretty good space in the grid and going to one that we think isn't going to be very good. Kind of balances out, but whatever. So there's now a really interesting space alongside Esteban Ocon at Alpine. Let's talk about the 2023 grid. Here's the graphic that Formula One put out on Twitter earlier today, and we can see there's a few question marks. I think Zhou Guanyu alongside Valtteri at Sauber. I think Yuki at AlphaTauri. Williams we can touch on in a second. But who do you think is going to be alongside Esteban at Alpine?
It's that Aussie lad, isn't it? Pistari, right? He's going to. I think they've just confirmed. Have they confirmed it yet?
While we're live? Come on, that's not very good. Didn't they see our schedule?
I'm not sure if it is confirmed yet. But I think that's what everyone's saying.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And actually, I seem to remember somebody at the Alpine team telling us last year that actually they basically signed a contract with Oscar that he will be in Formula One in 2023. And I remember thinking, hang on, you got a slight problem with mathematics there, because you got already 2 drivers that are probably going to stay. So I don't know whether, that does beg the question, was Fernando pushed or did he jump, or was he, do they not offer him a deal that he thought was acceptable because they knew they had Oscar? The good news about Oscar is he's super quick, right? 21 years of age, as you said, from Australia. Won the Formula 2 championship last year in 2021, having won the Formula 3 championship the year before. I think he won the Renault Euro Cup the year before that. I think basically just wins everything he touches. And he's the kind of guy that we like to see in Formula One. He's, of course, the official reserve driver this year. And fit, very capable, very fast, and good to have another Aussie on the grid.
Yeah,
and then that opens up the question of what happens with the Williams seats. We'll get into that. I'll try and dig into that a little bit with Alex Albon when I chat with him tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's look ahead then to what's coming up. What's coming up? We've got 3 weeks off. Well,
yeah,
Formula One has.
do.
We're going to be chatting with as many people as we possibly can to keep fans content with content. But let's have a look at the calendar, because the race that comes up after the summer break is, of course, the Belgian Grand Prix, Spa-Francorchamps, and then 2 more races in a row. The Netherlands, we go to Zandvoort, we go to Monza, then there's a couple of weeks break, and then we come to our home, Singapore, and the Marina Bay Circuit. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Alex, you're good at this prediction stuff. You were very good about Mercedes being fast at the Hungarian Grand Prix. Who do you think? Who's your eye on for the Belgian Grand Prix?
I'm going to go with Red Bull. I agree. Ferrari's got the fastest car out there right now, but the superior straight line speed of the Red Bull means they're going to be very racy at Spa, and I'm not really sure Ferrari can pick themselves up. And we saw in 2018 and 2019 when they started making mistakes halfway through the season, they got worse. It didn't get better, did it? And I think that's going to happen this year.
Oof. Well, anyway, it's good of you to wear a red T-shirt in support of the Scuderia. It's good of you, ladies and gentlemen.
It would have been great for them to win the championship this year. I would have loved to have seen that. It would have been.
And it's been fabulous to have you with us, Alex, as usual. Really appreciate your insight. Love the questions and comments we're getting from you, the audience of the GoF1 show. If you like what you've heard or seen and heard Alex and myself talking about, please do like, please do subscribe, please do follow, and please do follow us during the summer break on the YouTube channel and on Twitter. And we'll see you at the end of August for the Belgian Grand Prix.